The crown, as it were, of all these 7 levels, we're going to talk about tonight, the 7th level of intelligence, which is kindness. So, from Love Without End, kindness is not just an act of charity to the young, the vulnerable, or the needy. It's the will of God for everyone. Your goodness is strengthened through kindness. It is the will of the Father that you know and use that power to be a wise custodian of what you've been given. Through acts of kindness, your own abundance increases, for you have multiplied the ways in which your giving may be returned to you. I love that concept of every time I open my heart and share kindness, I have opened my heart also to receive. Not necessarily just from that person, but from the universe itself. Kindness is not talked about much in the world today, and few have any understanding what it really is. There's even a disregard for kindness as an act of appropriation made by the strong to the weak, a compensation for their dominance. Thus, many are embarrassed to accept kindness. If you contemplate kindness in your heart, however, you'll find it to be a far more interesting subject than that. The world regards kindness as a compensation for life or gentle protection from the harsher realities. Actually, kindness is the heart of living. It's what makes life bearable, meaningful, and delicious. You may begin by asking yourself this question: what would be the greatest kindness I could do for another? Then, what is the kindest thing I could do for myself? Now, the trick here is to be specific. That's the key to unlocking the intelligence of kindness. Generalities about kindness may lead to lovely sentiments that are inapplicable to your circumstance. You may be surprised with the answers you receive to direct and probing questions. We're going to do some of that tonight. So let's do a quick inventory of our limiting judgments about kindness and how we might reverse them. In a moment, you will take handout 1, the kindness inventory, and complete 1. A judgment I've had about being kind to myself is. What's the underlying fear behind that judgment? And what's the balancing truth? How I could be most kind to myself. Secondly, a judgment I've had about being kind to others is. What's the underlying fear there? And what's the balancing truth? How could I be most kind to others is. And thirdly, a judgment I've had about being kind to the world is. Again, looking at your underlying fear and the balancing truth. Now, for example, just to flesh this out a little bit for you, a judgment I've had about being kind to myself is I'd be seen as self-centered, selfish. Underlying fear is if I'm too self-involved, I won't be loved by those who want more from me. They'll see me as too self-centered. Balancing truth that I have to deal with that judgment is how I could be most kind to myself is to listen to my body's needs for rest and recreation, knowing that Source supports my self-care. Not like I'm living in a universe that I'm going to be chastised for taking care of myself. Secondly, a judgment I've had about being kind to others is, well, I'll be taken advantage of. Underlying fear is that others will see my kindness as a soft touch for getting what they want from me. Balancing truth, I'm just giving you examples of a truth that works for me. This isn't like the balancing truth for everyone. In each of these exercises, you have to fill them out as to what works for you. So for me, I said, how I could be most kind to others is, well, being honest with them about my limits and intentions, while being compassionate and giving in accord to my sense of true justice. Just today, for example, I was contacted by someone that I had seen a number of years ago who was dealing with complex trauma. He was adopted from another country, and I won't go into the story, but it was brutal, his upbringing. And he turned his life around, and he is becoming a child therapist. Again, we want to give to the world what we didn't get, and he contacted me and he said, oh, he's been following on my newsletter, which is open to all of you. I put a new video on the newsletter all the time. And he was appreciative of the work I was doing. And he could use a little advice because he was in the middle of taking his exams, national exams, I guess, in social work. And that old fear creeped back into me. And it's like, well, of course I want to connect with him. And of course I want to share with him. But is this going to be a series of sessions? And part of me says, well, I should do that. I should. It's like I had to grab myself by the collar and say, no, just say, are you looking for just an informal chat or do you want to set up a consult to get feedback? So I was just honest and telling him, this is how I do this. I kind of have a rule of thumb. Yeah, I'm willing to chat with anyone for a bit. But if it turns into what they really want is an in-depth consultation, well, that's a different story. Then we set that up formally. So I just had to reassure myself, no, I'm not going to take advantage of myself. I'm going to be honest with my limits and intentions while being compassionate. And I really do want to connect with them. And let's do it in the right way that feels a sense of true justice with it. Third one is a judgment I have about being kind to the world is, oh, there's too much need and I will be depleted. That's my dramatic representation of that. Underlying fear is I'm living in a world of not enough and I have to stay alert not to be drained. So balancing truth for me is how I could be most kind to the world is practice giving and receiving freely with increasing trust in the balance of universal abundance. My parents lived through the 1930s and the Depression, and there was a national belief in not enoughness. It was like the whole country was depressed, the Great Depression. And so some of that sense of, well, you got to stockpile things, you got to watch out, you don't give too much away. I inherited a bit of that mentality and I recognize it. And I'm not going to have it run my life. And it hasn't. All right. So this is a chance for you to look now at those three questions while we take 4 or 5 minutes for you just to really take your time, go into it, see what your judgments are, what the fears are underneath those judgments, and then how to deal with those fears with a balancing truth for yourself. So let's go ahead and do this together now. As always, if you don't have a handout there or written handout, just take a piece of paper or use your iPad or phone or whatever you want and write it down. Okay, now bring yourself back to the group with the intention of practicing kindness more often, either by design or spontaneously in your life to allow compassion and connectedness to fill your days. So let's take a few shares now. What came up for you, what you recognized about yourself, or even questions that you may have in doing this exercise?
The judgment I've had about being kind to myself. There's not enough time and I should be doing other things. Underlying fear is if I'm too kind to myself, I might open up a well of old loneliness and never stop crying. Balancing truth. It's totally fine to be kind to myself in whatever capacity I can allow. And with others, they'll want more and more and more. Underlying fear. I'll lose my sense of center and be overwhelmed, and I'll stop getting my own needs met. Balancing truth. I can be kind to others while setting my own boundaries without giving up my sense of self. Didn't quite get up to the rest of the world. The first one I just said, there's just too much going on for me to focus on.
No, that was great. That was beautiful. How did that feel in your body?
Well, it felt true. I live alone and stuff. I do find myself avoiding myself.
Yeah. Your responses were very heartwarming in a way. And if you can actually, like a loving parent, give that to yourself, yeah, there's a sense there that loneliness can be self-inflicted by staying in our mind rather than in going to the heart. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm learning myself personally and doing these exercises. Well, I'm taking this whole course is that, yeah, I'm a smart guy. I understand all this stuff, but do I feel it? And I've actually then started talking to myself through the heart and even talking to others that I may have an issue with, others just in my family. And it's a whole different feel for it, letting it come through the Sacred Heart rather than my computer mind. Thank you so much. Anyone else like to share? How about someone sharing their world one?
The judgment I had about being kind to the world is that I think that I am. I do world healing energy work and I donate to causes I find important. My underlying fear is that it really won't matter. It's not enough to make a difference.
Yeah.
And the balancing truth is to give freely when I can and just trust that the world will benefit as it can.
Yeah. Beautiful. Again, there is a good example of taking that balancing truth in, because the mind will always have a counter to everything. Oh yeah, what's $25 to, the children's fund? That doesn't go anywhere. The corporation is probably spending it on automobiles for the staff. Yeah, blah 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 blah. It's like, no, what is the experience of my energetically offering love to the world? And you do that in a number of different ways. So that's beautiful. Thanks.